At all, at all, at all.
Yeah, I figured it was okay.
You got it? Okay. Okay, folks. Um, okay, bear with us. We're having some audio problems, as is sometimes the case, so bear with us for a second. Okay, check, check. All right, not getting an echo here. So folks out there, oh, Sandra, thank you. So you can hear us okay. All right, that's excellent. We're just having some audio difficulties here, as sometimes happens. Can I get one more person to tell me that, yep, we can hear you fine? All right, thank you, Michelle. Okay, so folks, let's dive in and hopefully you can see me now. Good morning, everybody. I'm Chris Korleski. I'm the director of the Great Lakes National Program Office with EPA Region 5 here in Chicago. So first, we're delighted at the turnout this morning. We had over 200 people register. I can't tell exactly how many we have, but I think we're well over 100. Thank you, Angela. Thank you, Joseph. Looks like we've got good audio. So again, we're so pleased you're here because we're very excited about talking about this environmental justice RFA grants program. I'm just going to take about maybe 5, maybe 10 minutes. Oh, thank you, Mary Ellen, 121. That's pretty darn good. Okay. So I'm going to take 5 or 10 minutes and just give you an overview of what we're trying to do here. And I'm going to emphasize that this is indeed something new, something we've never tried before. We are looking at this as a pilot. We really want this to work. We really want this very different approach just to exceed our expectations and perhaps serve as a model for future RFAs to get money out into the underserved communities in the Great Lakes Basin. So again, I'm going to go briefly because we're going to have we're going to have about a 25-minute presentation later on. And then we're going to have plenty of time for questions. Just a comment or two on logistics. We are going to ask people to put their questions in the chat. We find that that works a lot better than having people on mics because often what will happen is we can't get to all the questions we want to. Whereas if we do it via chat, get those questions in, and we will do our best to get to every single one of them. Also, this is not the only opportunity that you're going to have to ask questions. We have a website that you can submit questions to, and also want to emphasize we will be scheduling a second webinar probably in about 3 weeks' time, so that after you have a chance to digest what we discussed today, you can think, okay, well, I understand this, but I still really don't understand that. So that's the purpose of the second webinar, which will be scheduled. And you'll have an opportunity then to come in and follow up. And please ask those questions because, as I said, this is something new and different and exciting, but we haven't done it before. So there are certainly you're going to have questions, and frankly, we probably will too as we work through this. Okay, let me dive into the substance of this. Just a couple of things I want to talk about. First, by looking at the participants, I think everybody out there is pretty familiar with the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative. I'm a little biased, of course, as the director of GLNPO, but I'm going to say that it has proven, and certainly in our view here, to be an incredibly successful program in restoring and protecting the Great Lakes. We've had some great successes, and boy, do we still have a lot of work to go. But it's a great program. It's proven to be effective, and we want to keep this thing running. Now, I think everyone else on this call understands that if you look at the Biden administration and the Reagan administration within EPA, I cannot emphasize the extent to which environmental justice and getting resources to underserved and overburdened communities is a priority, because indeed it is. It's coloring everything that we do now, and of course that's what's driving this very new and different RFA. This is one of the ways that we're trying to respond to the call to an increased emphasis on getting the resources to the communities that historically may have been or were overlooked. We want to try to make sure that communities that historically haven't had an effective voice have an increased voice in identifying their concerns and projects. And this RFA is one way we're trying to do it. Now, what's really different here, and I'm going to focus on this, what's really different from in this RFA from other RFAs is that we are not directly reaching out to the underserved communities. And that may sound weird. Well, okay, Chris, so you're saying you're targeting underserved communities, but you're not really reaching out to underserved communities. What does that mean? And this is the whole gist of this RFA. We are targeting, for the RFA that we're talking about today, we are targeting this thing called principal recipients. And you've looked at the RFA, you've seen that, and what does that mean? Well, think of this environmental justice grants program process at a two-stage or a two-step program. First, we want eligible applicants to come in and apply to run essentially your own grant programs in cooperation with us. Now, what does that mean? And first, why are we even doing this? What's driving this two-step approach to the RFA is our view that we here in EPA, the federal government, we're not as close to the underserved communities as a lot of the eligible applicants are. Meaning, we think that there are organizations, including NGOs, it could be states, it could be a university, it could be any one of the types of eligible applicants listed in the RFA that already has effective relationships with folks in underserved communities or with groups of communities or with representatives of those communities, or is willing to begin working very hard to establish those relationships. We want these principal recipients who, again, the idea is they are closer to the underserved communities than we are. They will be the ones in direct contact with the underserved communities because after the principal recipient sets up their own grant program, the underserved communities will go to them and say, we would like you to fund this project. So we want the underserved communities themselves to be driving the projects. We want them to say, hey, I live in X community and we've got a watershed that is so highly degraded. We've got a creek, and I'm making this up right now, of course, but we've got a creek running through our community and kids can't play in it. It's overgrown with buckthorn and weeds, and the water's dirty, and we would really like some help on trying to restore this watershed so we can bring back recreation and kids can play in it and fish can swim in it, et cetera, et cetera. That's what we're trying to do. Now, one caveat, anything that we fund, even through this two-step process, has to meet the goals of the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative. And that's really, really important to understand. We cannot simply fund any even well-deserving projects that an underserved community likes to do unless it meets the goals of the GLRI, which in a nutshell basically means you're protecting water quality, you're improving water quality, you're improving habitat, you are restoring and protecting the environment in an underserved community in the Great Lakes Basin. Now, we're trying to do this in two ways. So as you know, we're making $30 million available in this pilot RFA. We're anticipating that we would like to see applications for what we're calling basin-wide programs, which we're willing to fund up to $20 million. And we're hoping that there will be a successful applicant who's willing to come in and say, we do want to fund a basin-wide program. And we're going to come in for 20 million and to run a basin-wide program. It's a big job. It's a big task, but that's why we're putting substantial resources there. We also hope to fund up to 5, it could be 5, about 5, we're not sure the number, more localized programs targeting underserved communities. For example, and I'm making this up too, in a particular urban area, in a particular rural area, just in a particular well-defined area. And we're willing to make between $2 and $10 million available for those localized projects. So if we get one applicant. We want 10 million to run this program here. We could fund one of those at 10 million. We could get 5 excellent applications to do localized programs, and we would fund those at 2 million each. Now, one last point on this. We realize that in order for this to work and for the principal recipients to be successful, some of the money that we are making available is going to have to be used to, if you will, staff up the grants program. You're going to need capacity. A successful applicant, we anticipate, is likely to say, hey, we don't have a standing grants program right now. We're going to need people. We're going to need time to get this staffed up. We get it, and the money, a portion of the money can certainly be used for that. Certainly not all the money can be used for that, because then there'd be no money left over for the actual grants to the underserved communities. But we do understand some amount of that money is going to have to be used for capacity to staff that up. That's probably about where I'm going to stop, because again, we're going to have a follow-up presentation now. I'm going to hand it over to Kara and Erica from GLNPO to walk you through this in more detail. But folks, I'll close with this. We are extremely excited about this RFA. We really want it to work. It won't work without successful applicants. So please, we really hope we get great applications. And lastly, if you've got questions, again, keep them coming today, through the email, and through the next webinar that we'll be scheduling. So, okay, with that, I'm going to stop and hand it over to Kara and Erica. And again, folks, thanks for joining us this morning.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you to Chris for his warm welcome and the great overview of our program. We're going to take care of some housekeeping items before we get started, but we wanted to turn on our cameras for a little just to introduce ourselves. I am Kara Walsh, and I am the administrative lead for the RFA. Erica?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Erica. Oh, sorry, got a little echo. There we go. Oh, we still have a little echo. Okay, are we good? Oh, wonderful. Good morning, everyone. My name is Erica Sharon, and I am the technical lead for this RFA. As Kara said, welcome. We're happy to have you here, and thanks again to Chris for the warm introduction. I'm going to go ahead and turn off my camera just so we can focus on the materials that we have in front of us. But like Kara said, we wanted to show our faces and put names to faces, as is very important. Oh, let's go ahead and get started. Here are a few housekeeping reminders on this slide. Just so you all are aware, you are able to turn on live closed captions, but be aware that we will be adding closed captions to the recording of this webinar, which we will make available to the RFA webinar site. Please put all of your questions in the chat box. We will go through as many questions as possible during the allotted time for question and answer at the end of the presentation. Just to give you an estimate, the presentation itself will last about 40 minutes, and all remaining time will be used for questions and answers. This webinar, as I said, will be recorded, and the presentation slides will be shared along with the recording on the website. The RFA team will host a second webinar. Please check back with the RFA website for details. And if you have any remaining questions about the RFA, please reach out at any time to glri-rfa@epa.gov. Now, let's go ahead and go over our agenda for today. In order to make sure that everyone's on the same page, I'm going to start with a brief overview of the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, or the GLRI, and the corresponding GLRI Action Plan 3. This will include specific objectives and measures of progress that are relevant to this RFA. Then I'm going to walk us through the key definitions of key terms used by EPA to define and think about environmental justice. After that, I'm going to hand it over to Kara again, and she will cover the Great Lakes Environmental Justice Grant Programs, or GLEGIP, RFA opportunity, including the RFA structure and eligibility information, as well as some applicant reminder and resources. So what is the GLRI? Well, the GLRI is a non-regulatory program consisting of multi-agency efforts to protect and restore the Great Lakes. The GLRI provides resources for meeting long-term specific environmental goals, including safe water for recreation, the removal of harmful algal blooms, and the restoration and protection of native habitats. The objectives of the GLRI are captured in the corresponding GLRI Action Plan 3. The action plan was developed with input from states, tribes, local governments, and others. The action plan identifies 5 specific focus areas which support the objectives for accelerating environmental progress and for meeting these long-term goals. On this slide, you will see, go back, please. Thank you. On this slide, you will see 4 focus areas. Focus Area 2 for invasive species, Focus Area 3, non-point source pollution, impacts on nearshore health, Focus Area 4, habitats and species, and Focus Area 5, foundations for future restoration actions, with some of the corresponding objectives. The focus areas and objectives included on this slide represent those which are applicable to the GLGIP RFA. In order to track progress on the focus areas and their objectives, the GLRI Action Plan 3 uses measures of progress specific to each objective. A quick note, while there are 5 focus areas, Focus Area 1 and its objectives and measures of progress are not included here because they are not applicable to this RFA. Next slide, please. So every project funded through the GLRI must use at least one GLRI measure of progress to track and quantify advancement towards all relevant Action Plan 3 objective or objectives. For example, a project doing habitat restoration and experiential learning in partnership with a local school might use measure 4.1.1, acres of coastal wetland near shore and other habitats restored, protected, or enhanced, along with measure 5.1.1, youth impacted through education and stewardship projects to report on progress. The measures of progress on this screen represent the specific measures of progress applicable to the GLGIP RFA. And as a reminder, you can also find this information in the RFA document on page 17. Now we're going to switch gears and we're going to talk about environmental justice, or EJ as it's sometimes called, and the definitions of key concepts related to environmental justice as used by EPA. EPA is committed to advancing environmental justice and civil rights under Goal 2 of its strategic plan. EPA's Office of Environmental Justice and External Civil Rights, or OEJ-ECR, defines environmental justice as the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people, regardless of race, color, national origin, or income, with respect to the development, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws, regulations, and policies. In order to capture the scope of environmental justice at EPA, it's necessary for us to present and define a few other key terms which overlap and connect to environmental justice in this context. These terms are underserved communities, equity, meaningful involvement, and fair treatment. Before we go through the definitions, please note that the definition and use of these terms come either directly from the administration or from the agency. For additional context and sources, please refer to page 5 of the RFA document. Let's walk through the definitions for each of the environmental justice key terms. OEJ-ECR's definition of environmental justice includes fair treatment and meaningful involvement, which are defined as follows. Fair treatment means that no group of people should bear a disproportionate share of the adverse environmental and human health risks and/or harms resulting from industrial, governmental, and commercial operations or policies. Meaningful involvement means that all people have an opportunity to participate in decisions about activities which may affect their environment and/or their health. In addition to these two terms, environmental justice-related activities and actions at EPA are informed by the following terms from Executive Order 13985, Advancing Racial Equity and Support for Underserved Communities through the federal government. This executive order directs the entire federal government to take a comprehensive approach to pursue equity for all. Equity here means the consistent and systemic fair, just, and impartial treatment of all individuals, including individuals who belong to underserved communities that have been denied such treatment, such as Black, Latino, and Indigenous and Native American persons, Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders and other persons of color, members of the LGBTQ community, persons with disabilities, persons who live in rural areas, members of religious minorities, and persons otherwise adversely affected by persistent poverty or inequality. Now, in the definition of equity, the term underserved communities appears. Underserved communities refer to populations sharing a specific characteristic, as well as geographic communities that have been systemically denied a full opportunity to participate in aspects of economic, social, and civil life, as you can see in the above definition of equity that we covered. these populations experience one or more variables which impact human health and the environment, including, though not limited to, persistent poverty, high environmental stress burdens, including the impacts from climate change, racial and ethnic segregation, and impaired or limited impacts to healthcare. So, how does environmental justice connect to the GLRI? Well, the GLRI relies on collaborative action in order to achieve its long-term goals of protecting and restoring the Great Lakes. This means that all communities, including underserved communities, should have the opportunities to participate in and benefit from programs designed to protect and restore the Great Lakes. The Great Lakes Environmental Justice Grant programs resulting from this RFA seek to bridge the objectives of the GLRI Action Plan 3 with environmental justice by facilitating projects with and in underserved Great Lakes communities. Now I'm going to hand it over to Kara, who will go through the GLEADSHIP RFA and its objectives in more detail. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Erica. We're going to pivot a little and talk more about the purpose of the RFA, some key terms to understanding the structure of the program, and eligibility requirements. EPA intends to make up to $30 million available for one or more Great Lakes environmental justice programs, which I will be referring to as GLEADSHIPs for the rest of the presentation. This funding is for the implementation of environmental protection and restoration projects in underserved communities that will further the goals of the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative. This RFA expects to provide funding available for two types of applications. Applications that aim to create a GLEADSHIP to provide funding for projects in a particular region of the Great Lakes Basin, and applications that aim to create a GLEADSHIP to provide funding for projects across the entire Great Lakes Basin. While the primary goal of this RFA is the implementation of projects in underserved communities, EPA recognizes that many such communities may not have the capacity for pursuing such grants directly from EPA. Due to historical underinvestment, these communities may lack the resources that would enable them to effectively prepare competitive federal grant applications that can be readily submitted and processed through grants.gov, or effectively comply with the wide array of requirements that accompany receipt of a grant from EPA, such as grant management and oversight, reporting, and closeout. This RFA and the resultant GLEADSHIPs reflect the Great Lakes National Program Office's attempt to address this lack of resources by alleviating the administrative and other burdens faced by such communities when trying to apply for federal funds, and where appropriate, providing technical support to selected project subrecipients that will better enable them to utilize and manage federal funds. Next slide, please. Here we have a list of key terms that are essential to understanding the structure of the GLEADSHIP. For reference, these terms and definitions can be found on page 6 and 7 of the RFA document. Next slide, please. The principal recipient is the pass-through entity, or the initial recipient of funding from EPA. The principal recipient would be accountable to EPA for overall performance of the cooperative agreement, as well as management and oversight of subrecipients, including any possible coalition members and project subrecipients. Project subrecipients are the main focus of funding for the GLEADSHIP, and they will be the organizations completing on-the-ground work. These subrecipients are selected by the principal recipient through the project RFA to complete Great Lakes Restoration Initiative funded projects under the supervision of the principal recipient and any possible coalition members. The project RFA is the process or program which is developed by the principal recipient and any possible coalition members that will solicit, identify, select, and fund applications for projects from eligible organizations in targeted underserved communities. Which communities for this RFA is defined as including governmental organizations, NGOs, and any entity eligible for a grant working within a specific locale, neighborhood, town, or city. Coalitions are defined as groups of 2 or more eligible applicants that choose to form a coalition and submit a single application under this RFA. It should be noted that one entity will remain responsible for the grant, and any member of the coalition would not be an eligible project subrecipient. Next slide, please. So now that we have talked through the key terms, we can talk about the structure of the GLEGIP. You can see on the flowchart to the left, the principal recipient and coalition members will oversee the project RFA and the resulting subawards, as well as provide technical and administrative support to the project subrecipients, all with the general goal of reducing the administrative burden for the project subrecipients. The selected principal recipient and coalition members should already have close contacts and effective relationships with their targeted underserved communities, or they should be able to quickly develop such contacts and relationships. The project RFA should be a competitive awards process that can issue subawards in a timely manner. The application process should minimize the administrative burden on project RFA applicants, while still ensuring a transparent, fair, competitive awards process. The project RFA will also be the vehicle for the principal recipient and coalition members to provide technical support to project subrecipients and ensure that all subawards are being effectively managed in accordance with the EPA subaward policy. The selected project subrecipients will be responsible for on-the-ground work, the local projects which will support the goals of the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative in underserved communities, thereby addressing community-level environmental justice concerns. These local projects will have both environmental and environmental justice-related outputs and outcomes that will be compiled for each project by the principal recipient and tracked by EPA for reporting. Next slide, please. The RFA has two categories related to the geographic scope of a proposed GLEGIP: basin-wide GLEGIPs, or programs that comprehensively cover the Great Lakes Basin in its entirety, are eligible for an award of 10 to 20 million. If a GLEGIP covers a smaller subset of the Great Lakes Basin, for example, northeastern Illinois or southeast Michigan, it is eligible for an award of 2 to 10 million. Next slide, please. Now that we have discussed the structure of a GLEGIP, we can talk about what the GLEGIP is and what it is not. Applicants must be a non-federal entity eligible to apply for grants. Please see Section 3A in the RFA for a complete list. And while the applicant doesn't necessarily need to be within the Great Lakes region, all eligible projects must take place in the historic Great Lakes Basin. Every project must describe how it will either protect, enhance, or restore the Great Lakes, including connecting waterways, or projects that protect Great Lakes ecosystem health, including human health. More specifically, all projects must address and link to a specific eligible GLRI measure of progress, which can be found on page 17 of the RFA. All projects must be within underserved communities in the Great Lakes geographic region. And this might be a good time to talk about what is an underserved community. While Erica talked about this earlier, each applicant will need to describe their own approach for identifying underserved communities in the context of its proposed project RFA. You could choose to use EJ Screen or the Climate and Economic Justice Screening tool, both of which are linked in the RFA document. However, small tribes and underserved, unincorporated communities may not appear on traditional mapping tools such as EJ Screen. Efforts to conduct targeted outreach in hard-to-reach communities in order to identify communities who need key infrastructure projects and social activities is encouraged. Conclusively, applicants are also allowed to use narrative justification in their identification of underserved communities. And as reminders, collegiate projects cannot be focused solely on monitoring or scientific research. They cannot be outside the scope of EPA statutory authority, Clean Water Act Section 118C7, or the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative. Applications and projects may not be focused solely on improving access or providing for recreational activities, and they cannot be focused solely on workforce development activities, though applicants are encouraged to incorporate elements of these into their application. Lastly, applicants must make sure they are seeking funding appropriate for the geographic boundaries of their project, which, as a reminder, the applications seeking to create a regional collegiate may request between 2 and 10 million, and applications seeking to create a basin-wide collegiate may request between 10 million and 20 million. Next slide, please. Now we can discuss some helpful reminders in the application process. While you develop your application, you should make sure now that you are registered for a unique entity ID with the System for Award Management, or SAM, which stopped using DUNS numbers in April of 2022. You also need to complete all steps for grants.gov registration now, including registration of your authorized representative. Not having the correct registrations is an issue that trips up applicants every year, so please do not wait. If you think you might be applying to this opportunity, check your registrations and their expiration dates now, and make sure any staff that needs has access to it. These are not EPA systems, and EPA staff cannot help resolve your issues, especially in the final days and hours that the RFA is open. As you develop your applications, read through the RFA once, twice, as many times as you need to understand the requirements of the RFA. Pay special attention to threshold eligibility criteria and evaluation criteria. Application packages must be in PDF form, so make sure you have this capability now instead of at the 11th hour. You will submit your applications electronically via grants.gov by August 11th, 2023 at 11:59 p.m. in Eastern Time. When you submit, you will receive an automatic reply from grants.gov acknowledging your submission. If you have any technical issues, contact grants.gov or sam.gov separately, as again, these are not EPA systems and we cannot help resolve your issues. If you need to request an exception due to technical issues, please contact GLRI-RFA at EPA.gov before the deadline, but note that this does not guarantee that your application can be accepted. Next slide, please. Here we have a list of resources for you as you develop your application. As a reminder, the PowerPoint will be uploaded as a PDF on the RFA website after the webinar, so you will have access to these links later. EPA has extensive resources to help explain the grants process and develop and submit your application. Additionally, we have called out RFA-specific resources, including specific sections of the RFA that will provide helpful information. And again, if you have any questions, please contact GLRI-RFA at EPA.gov. Thank you all for listening to our presentation, and we will move to the Q&A session of the webinar, which will be conducted by Jennifer Connor, Lead Project Officer. We will get to as many questions as we can in session, and we will post all questions and answers to the RFA website after the webinar. So if we don't get to a question today, it will be answered later on the website. And as a reminder, we are not able to provide feedback on specific project ideas for competition reasons, and we cannot provide specific feedback on how a project might score. We can provide feedback on whether an activity might be eligible, but official eligibility evaluation will be conducted by the review panel. Jennifer?
Okay, let me check. I don't see any questions. Okay, so I bring up the FAQ list. We have a question. You have one? Oh, just through.
Oh, no, they're just submitting, they're sharing information.
Are there guidelines on the proportion of funds the EPA expects to allocate to the expense of setting up and administering the grants?
Could you read that question one more time?
Are there guidelines on the proportion of funds the EPA expects to allocate to the expense of setting up and administering the grants?
That's like it's getting that. Is there a proportion that we use capacity, et cetera?
So I think the answer to that is there are no defined limits to the amount that applicants can allocate towards setting up and administering an RFA. We would be evaluating the proposals based on the efficiency and effectiveness of how that program is designed.
Okay. Is there any reason a specific municipality or county could not submit as a principal recipient?
So a municipality could submit an application to be a principal recipient, provided the program they describe meets all of the eligibility criteria, namely that they're setting up a open and fair grant competition for their community or a set of communities.
Okay. Do underserved communities still need to register with SAM.gov and have all the reporting responsibilities of federal subrecipients? Can you explain more about helping with administration burden?
So I'm going to jump in. So one of the driving reasons we did it this way was we do not want the underserved communities themselves to have to go through the tortuous, well, I'm just being honest, the sometimes tortuous processes of getting through grants.gov, including the SAMS number, et cetera. So no, it's our intention that the principal recipient will be the one that goes through that, and then the communities themselves will not have to go through that. That was something that was driving our whole approach to this.
Okay. Ohio does not have any federal or state recognized tribal lands. Can we include outreach to projects in this community, even if they are not formally recognized? Or would it need to rely on the screening and tools of economic factors?
Yes, so I can jump in to answer that one. Even though those communities may not be formally recognized, if there is a documented need, whether that can be like local newspapers, that can be other articles, you do not need to rely solely on EJ Screen or the Climate and Economic Justice Screening Tool to justify that. If you can make the case for why those communities are underserved and they have needs that could be met through this RFA, please absolutely include them.
Okay.
And Jennifer, can I just go back? I think we may have missed a question in the chat. And the question was, so the principal recipient can only manage the subrecipient projects. They can't do the projects themselves, and that is correct. We really don't want the principal recipient managing the projects themselves. We want them to run the grants process, and we want the applicants and the subawardees to be the underserved communities themselves.
Okay. Will basin-wide PR serve areas without a designated PR for a smaller part of the region? or will their service areas overlap?
Did you read that
Yeah,
question?
can you read that
one more
one?
time?
Will basin-wide PR serve areas without a designated PR for a smaller part of the region, or will their service areas overlap?
I believe, and I can turn to my team here as well, that if it is a basin-wide PR, that they will be serving the entire basin. And that could be something that's delegated within a coalition, if it's the coalition that has applied. Otherwise, that organization would be serving the entire basin. Now, this is something that we can definitely discuss and clarify a bit more. If there's a basin-wide PR and then also a smaller PR, which is awarded at a regional level, we can discuss what that coordination would look like so that there's not like a double layer there. But, the understanding right now is that if it's basin-wide, it will be open to the whole basin. And then there will be, if there are smaller regional PRs, that they will focus specifically on that smaller region within the basin.
So another way to say that I think is overlapping is okay. That's how I would cut to the chase on that one. Overlapping is okay.
Okay. I understand the authorship of the proposal can be co-written and co-submitted by a coalition. However, I am unsure how to document the budget. Do we complete several line item budgets for each of the members of a coalition and a budget narrative tying them all together? Do we complete them several lines items budgets for each of the members of the coalition and a budget narrative tying them all together? Do we submit one line item budget and all the coalition members who are not the PR will have a single item listed in the other category?
If I'm understanding the question, I think that the answer is that there should be one detailed budget narrative covering the entire project. And whoever is submitting the proposal and responsible for managing the agreement would provide their budget in all of the object class categories that you're used to. So personnel and fringe and travel, equipment, supplies, contracting, and other. And the other coalition members, if they are receiving funds from the grant, they would receive funds via a subaward. And their detailed budget would, so they should also have a detailed budget, but it would all be included in the other object class category.
Okay. The second part, do we submit one line item budget and all the coalition members who are not the PR would have a single item listed in the other category with a letter of partnership and budget narrative indicating how much money in the other category is being used? Or do we have one line item budget with staffing, supplies, travel, etc., all listed as necessary for the overall coalition needs with the budget narrative indicating how each proportion of the budget is used by each coalition? Or is there a fourth option I am not aware of?
I'll go back to what my previous response was, that every coalition member receiving funds will need to provide a detailed budget narrative. If it's a coalition member that is not the direct recipient of the EPA funds, that detailed budget would go under the other object class category. However, they should provide in the budget narrative a detailed description of how those funds will be used. So it shouldn't be just a single line item for coalition member A receives X dollars. It should be a detailed description of how those funds will be used.
Okay. So the principal recipient can only manage the subrecipient projects. They can't do the projects themselves.
Yes, we've addressed that, and the answer is yes, they cannot. We want them to run the grants program.
Okay. Let me see, because they are coming in fast.
So I see, Michael, you got a question. This opportunity does not include focus area 1, AOC/toxics. Since many AOCs may have underserved communities populations, which is absolutely true, does EPA have guidelines for how to operate in AOCs without causing duplication, interference in that program? So Michael, I think the short answer is we want to be extremely flexible in administering this program. And that coupled with the fact that projects in AOCs are certainly, so I don't think we want to write, because I think it would be very difficult to write hard and fast guidelines about when an underserved community desired project might somehow conflict with the work that we're already doing in an AOC. My answer would be, I would encourage an underserved community, if they've got a project within an AOC that they think is worthy of funding and they really think it's important, they should definitely submit an application for that project. And we, I think it's safe to say we and the principal recipient, we're going to encourage them to be extremely flexible and not somehow look askance at that project simply because it's in an AOC. We would want it to be considered on its own independent merits.
And if I can add to that just very quickly, so the way that these awards will be set up is the structure will be a cooperative agreement with EPA. So there will be a lot of coordination between GLNPO and the principal recipients.
Are there guidelines about the level of competition is expected in the RFA a principal recipient releases? Since we will aim to support specific communities, I can imagine this could be a challenge.
So, we have left that a bit open-ended, but I would encourage you to refer to so sorry, my mind just went blank. We have a section outlining kind of the criteria that we will be looking for. And I would encourage you to read that closely and think about how you would incorporate that into a competitive and transparent granting process.
In applications, can you include unlimited footnotes with links and appendices?
So the answer to that question is there is a page limit to the application. So you may include all of the appendices that you wish, but only the first 25 pages of the project narrative will be evaluated by our reviewers.
Could a regional application include an entire state?
Yes, with the caveat that the entire state must fall within the historic bounds of the Great Lakes Basin. So for example, if you are from the state of Illinois, we love Illinois, but the entire state does not fall within that geographic bound.
What does the reporting look like? Will the PR have to report back on the impact of all grantees funded? And if so, how often will this be required?
Yes, so reporting will be required twice a year, and EPA, we will help send out reminders and we will facilitate that process. But we will be looking for reporting from the principal recipient on all sub-awarded projects and the impacts that those projects have had.
Okay. Am I understanding properly that the August 11th round of proposals are proposals for groups who are interested in becoming the PR?
Yes, to confirm, yes, the August 11th deadline is the deadline for proposals for individual organizations or coalitions who are interested in becoming the principal recipient. It would be a little crazy to ask you to come up with a competitive grants process by August 11th. So just to be very clear, this is the deadline for proposals for organizations or coalitions interested in becoming the principal recipient.
How will underserved communities know what principal recipient organizations serve their community? How will EPA cover all geographics if there are gaps in the coverage areas of the PRs?
So the first question about how will underserved communities know what PRs are serving their community? The answer there is the PR needs to do a good job of getting the word out. Because again, they're running the program. They need to properly announce, advertise, whatever whatever the right word is, to let people know, hey, we are running this grants program. So that's going to be up to the principal recipient to make sure that the word gets out. The second question, how will EPA cover all geographies if there are gaps in the coverage area of PRs? So as I said before, this is a pilot project. We want to see how this works. We certainly can't guarantee that, you know, within this first year, all areas within the Great Lakes are going to be covered. So we can't guarantee that there won't be gaps in coverage. But again, the important thing is we want to see if this approach works. And if it is successful, then we hope in coming years, I'd like to think that we would be able to do similar RFAs to cover even more communities.
Okay. Do all the subrecipient projects need to be known first, or does the entity ask for a set amount and then do the RFA to the communities for the projects? So we don't need to know what the projects are going to be when we submit our application.
Yes, so that is the correct understanding, which is that applicants applying to be a principal recipient are applying for a set amount, and then if that is awarded with that set amount, the project RFA would then be established thereafter. So you do not need to know what the projects are going to be when the application is submitted for a project.
Okay, thank you. Is there guidance in the application pertaining to any CWAP requirements for the individual projects and associated subrecipients?
So we do have some guidance included in the RFA document. However, this is also something that once awards are made, EPA will provide additional guidance and support to the principal recipient.
Okay. Just a second. The next question. The principal recipient is the grant administrator and is not executing the program's projects on the ground. However, can the principal recipient be a partner with the subawardee organizations in execution of projects or programs?
So our hope here is that the principal recipient, again, will run the grants program, and their primary role is to fund the projects. Now, the RFA makes it pretty clear that we expect that the principal recipient may be asked to provide technical assistance. So we definitely want this to be a collaborative process. So, but the bottom line is, again, the primary function of the principal recipient is to get the money out, review the project, select the successful applicants, and then assist with the record keeping, implementation, et cetera. I think part of what we're struggling with this question is the question whether or not the principal recipient can essentially be boots on the ground, side by side with the underserved community and this underserved community subawardees, et cetera, to get the work done. We want to be extremely flexible in this program, but I think it could get awkward if the grantor and the grantee are so closely related. It's hard to tell them apart in terms of the work that's being done, just because that arguably raises a potential conflict of interest, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't know that we can draw a bright line today, except by saying, again, the premier function, what we really want the principal recipients to do is to establish a grants program with criteria for selecting projects, for getting out their mini RFA, if you will, to making sure that underserved communities are aware that the money is available, making it clear how underserved communities, what they need to do to apply to the principal recipient for that money, and then selecting the winners and helping the winners basically make sure that record keeping, et cetera, is done appropriately. So we view, just to be clear, we really do view the principal recipient's primary role as administrative here and not boots on the ground. But again, we also know that they will need to work together cooperatively, especially because underserved communities are going to need help in implementing projects. But again, we are really looking for that administrative role, much more so than our boots on the ground. We're gonna build these projects ourselves.
Okay. Is there a set timeline for these grant programs? How long are the programs expected to last?
So we are looking at a timeline of a 6-year period. And so that would mean an award for a 6-year period for the principal recipient. To give just kind of an estimate of what a timeline might look like. Let's say an award is made, you take 6 months to a year to get things rolling, get the project RFA set up, and then thereafter, as long as any awards made under the project RFA are closed out within that 6-year period, then we're good to go, but looking at a 6-year award period.
Okay. Is there guidance on how much to ask for if we don't use the grant funds? Is that an issue?
So I would address that by encouraging principal recipients to just, in the process of getting your application together, think about what you realistically hope to achieve. Because we really don't want to fund an applicant with a lot of money only to have a very small proportion of that money be used. That's not productive for a lot of reasons that I think everyone can readily understand. So we don't have guidelines, but again, it's going to be incumbent upon the principal recipient to know their targeted communities, to know the world that they're targeting, and to have a feel for, well, given the resources we're going to have, given the resources we think we'll need, what kind of projects and what amount of projects do we think we can fund? That's really a decision the principal recipient needs to make. And if that means that you're like, oh gosh, I'm not sure that I want to go in for a $20 million program, or I'm not sure I want to do 10 million for a smaller localized program. That's okay. To come in for something small.
What I would add to that, Chris, is that we'll be funding these awards with what we call incremental funding, which means if you come in for $20 million and you're selected for funding, you wouldn't receive the full 20 million up front. We would be looking to fund a portion of that every year. And so the selected cooperative agreement recipient would work with our project officer at EPA annually to project the next year's funding need, and we'd be looking to make that funding available for what is needed in that upcoming year.
So I believe that should address the next question. The funding amounts are for the entire project period and not annual, correct?
That is correct. As much as
Yeah.
we wish we had 30 million a year, this.
Okay. I apologize if this has already been answered, but will the meeting recording be sent out to the attendees? I'm just coming from another meeting.
No problem at all. We will be posting a recording of this meeting on the RFA website as well as a copy of the slides.
Is there an expectation of whether small subawards 50K or the large subawards 750K are preferable? For example, a large subaward could be the only thing a regional PR could award if they ask for the minimum of 2 million.
I would say that the RFA does not state a preference for the size of the subaward as long as it is within the $50,000 to $750,000 limit stated by the RFA. And we would be looking to applicants to describe the program that they wish to carry out and why that makes sense for your program.
Okay. I'm sorry if this has already been required.
I think they've been asked.
Oh, been asked, I'm sorry. Will there be a non-federal cost share or match required of grants made by the principal recipient?
Ooh, we are so glad you asked that question because that's a critical one. And we are delighted to tell everyone the answer is no. We are not requiring matches, non-federal sponsors. No, we are not doing that. Because again, we want to try to make this, we want to make this money as available as we can.
Okay. Can the recipient make multi-year grants to sub-recipients?
Within the project RFA, if there is an applicant that has a multi-year program that is selected for funding, as long as that program is able to be executed and closed out within the lifetime of the cooperative agreement, which is a 6-year period, that is allowable.
Okay. The objectives that were listed in this webinar do not include remediation of toxic, contaminated sediments, water, or air. Is meeting objectives of the GLRI related to toxics considered unresponsive to this RFA?
So focus area 1, which covers the AOC programs as well as the remediation of toxics. That focus area is not covered under this RFA. However, the other 4 focus areas are.
Okay. Those are all the questions that I see here.
So we'll just reiterate again. If you look at the slide that's currently up on the screen, other questions can be submitted to that email address, glri-rfa@epa.gov. Please submit those questions. Stay tuned. We will be announcing another webinar in a couple of weeks because we expect there may be follow-up questions. So we are doing something different. We will certainly be challenged to address every question and to answer every question, but folks, I think what's so exciting about this is that everyone on this call is interested in trying to get funding to underserved communities. And everyone on this call wouldn't be here if they didn't think they at least could potentially play a role in doing that through this RFA. So we view this as an opportunity to use not just agency government resources, but to use the combined resources of the federal government and all the eligible applicants under this RFA, again, to try to target money to underserved communities.
Okay. So to confirm, projects in the AOCs can happen under the program.
The answer to that is projects within AOCs are eligible as project subawards. However, projects that are solely related to focus area 1, which is the toxics and AOCs program, would not be eligible.
Okay. We will paste the grants website in the chat. Okay, thank you.
Looks like it's been done.
Okay.
So we're going to hold for just a minute or two to see if people have other questions. So I'm going to address the question about, well, why not focus area 1? It's a matter of just practicality and logistics. Focus area 1 is an area where the great majority of the work that's being done is being done by the federal government in collaboration with states and on a few occasions with tribes. Because they have what we call the jurisdictional authority to do a lot of this work that smaller non-public entities might not have. So another way to say that is so much of the work in AOCs is very expensive. It takes years to plan in terms of the sediment remediation work that's being done or the habitat projects. And we thought it would be very, very difficult for an underserved community to come in and say, we want to try to take on, a big focus area 1 task in this particular AOC. We think that the underserved community would probably be, they'd get a lot more benefit, we think, than focusing on something that's outside the scope of focus area 1, but still of great importance to the community. And another way to say that is so much of that focus area 1 work is already planned or underway or getting done that it just seemed that this was a good place for a separation.
Will the recipient have to front the money to subrecipients, or how would the initial year of funding be determined?
So because this agreement will be funded incrementally, it will be up to the principal recipient to plan for and budget that first year of funding and all additional years. So a principal recipient may, they may say for that first year, they only need a small subset of whatever award amount that they have requested and been awarded. And then going out, they can, budget and say, this year within the project RFA, we want to award, have 2 million available for awards and so on and so forth.
Okay. Does the EPA expect to be involved directly in selecting subrecipients, such as successful grant applicants?
No. If you have additional, sorry, that was rather abrupt. The answer to that is no. EPA, I believe because of the competition requirements, we are not able to advise, but I will defer for other comments.
To Erica, you're correct. We would not be looking to influence or make selections under your RFAs. We would, however, look to review the design and the criteria of your project RFA to ensure that it aligns with the GLRI.
Okay. You mentioned that the principal recipient could not receive the award. Our nonprofit has potential recipients that serve on our board. Would they automatically be precluded? In the context, we have 3 tribal nations on our board, and would those nations be precluded from receiving a grant?
That's a great question and probably one we should table for now, and we'll do a little research here in GLNPO to see how to best answer that. And we'll reach out. We'll include it in our Q&A on the website, but we will also reach out to you directly via email with an answer.
Okay. That seems to be the last question here.
I don't know if the person who asked about there's a gap in coverage of the GLEGIPs. I don't know if they are still online, but I did want to just take a moment. The EPA has set up national level technical assistance centers that are geared towards communities, and there are 2 in Region 5, one in Minneapolis, I believe, and the other in Chicago. And those cover the entire Great Lakes Basin. So I do just want to say, even though that is that is separate from this RFA, that is a resource that could be useful and may help bridge the gaps.
Okay. Is the grant reimbursement based only through, or can money be requested upfront incrementally?
I'm not sure I fully understand the question, but the grants will be funded incrementally, and with the grant award, the initial grant award, there will be an initial increment of funding made available. And as Erica described before, we'd be looking to the applicants to budget for that, their estimate for what would be needed that first year, and to work with their assigned EPA project officer to settle on the amount of that first increment that would be made available. So some funding will be available when you receive your initial award.
Do subrecipients need to be 501c3?
That's another one that we'll do a little research to confirm. We don't want to provide a definitive answer that might be incorrect. So as with the other question, we'll reach out directly to you with the answer after we do a little research, and we'll post the answer in the Q&A.
Will there be a FAQ release that builds on these questions, or should we reference the video recording only?
Yeah, so on the RFA website, which we can also pop again the website in the chat, we will update that page. Do we update that weekly or bi-weekly?
We should do that weekly.
Update it weekly, yeah. So as we receive questions through the email address there, the GLRI-RFA@epa.gov, and then after each of the webinars, we will be updating the RFA website with any questions that have been asked, as well as answers, so you can refer back to that.
There are no more questions.
Okay, we will hang tight just for another minute or two. We want to see if there's any more coming in. Okay, it's getting pretty quiet out there and it looks like people are starting to leave the call. So I'm going to close this out by thanking everyone for joining with us today. Again, we're extremely excited about this. We really want to make this work. We appreciate the questions today, especially the ones that we didn't anticipate and that we had to get back to you on. In particular, the question about does the subrecipient have to be a 501c3? I probably shouldn't say this, but I hope not. But we need to look into that. So we'll definitely check into that. So folks, again, keep the questions coming on the email. Watch for the next webinar. And we will do our best to keep your questions posted in the FAQs, etc. And again, folks, let's really work together to try to make this work. We really are excited about getting some good applications from the brave souls out there that really want to jump in and take on this significant responsibility. So anything else? Okay, I think that is a wrap. So folks, thank you very much. One last check at the chat. Okay, there we've got Michelle, thank you. So we'll take a look at that. And with that, we'll wish everybody a good day. Thanks for your time today, and we will talk to you next time. Thanks so much.